Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, which is all about market research review of some research Thomas and I have conducted about the cosmetics industry after COVID. So obviously it does feel a little bit never ending at the moment, but we are coming towards the end of this global pandemic, or at least learning how to now go back to what is a normal life and coping with it. So with that, obviously, we're rethinking about how industries have changed and how they'll continue to change and move forward. And in particular, the cosmetics industry, as I know that's where many of you are kind of focused as well. So we do see a lot about people talking about how it will change, but the main thing that we want to find out is, what do consumers think? What are their insights? What are their behaviors? And kind of getting some feedback from them so we can make some predictions about how we should move forward as well. So the agenda today, I'll be looking at an overview of social market research as well, just to give us some ideas about, as well as looking at the research that we've conducted, why might you want to conduct similar types of research? Because it can be really helpful to have an overview of the general public and what consumers are thinking. We'll also be sharing those insights. So Thomas will take us through the study that we did and look at what the results were from that study. He'll also be looking at perspectives on data visualization, so how we actually present those results so we can read them essentially and find out what those insights are. And we'll be talking a little bit about things like questionnaire and bias as well for study design. So again, as well as looking at what this research is all about, we're also thinking about how we can, conduct further research and further market research studies as well. So Thomas, it'd be great if you could introduce yourself.
Thanks, Carys. Yeah, for those who don't know me, I'm Thomas Marquardt. I'm heading the German branch of Aiden Global Research, and I've been in market research for, well, at least not all my life, but at least all my professional life. The longest time in Unilever, which I assume most of you will know as a big FMCG company, and that the pleasure of having a global job in the end in foods, so traveling the world and seeing and comparing how chefs cook around the world. I left this now 8 or 9 years ago to create my own business, and ever since I've lived my passion of sharing and bringing the consumers closer to the companies, because I feel there's still too many companies who don't really respect and don't really think of the consumer in the closest sense. So this is actually why we are here. So together with Aiden, we could actually explore a bit more what consumers think and want, and this we will be happy to share in the next couple of minutes.
And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Carys and I'm the Regulatory Director at Eaton Global Research. So I'm mainly looking at things like study design and questionnaire design and the reasons that people are doing their research and making sure that it's compliant. So much of our studies are for claims substantiation in particular. So I'll be looking at advertising regulations and regulations for testing. But certainly when it comes to market research, it's really looking at how we can use those insights for our customers. And also making sure that, again, that we're doing research in a proper way, so we're not just kind of asking questions willy-nilly and getting results that don't really mean anything, because obviously that's not going to be very valid. So if you're ever doing a new project for market research or consumer research, please do feel free to reach out to me. I forgot to mention that this webinar is being recorded, by the way. So I'll be sending out this recording at the end of the webinar. And there's also going to be a chance for a Q&A. So as we go through it, if you've got any questions, feel free to put them in the little Q&A box, but also feel free to share things through the chat as well. So if you want to kind of share anything of your experiences, similar experiences, or just any comments on the research itself, please feel free to have some chat in there. It'd be great if you guys can interact as well. But yes, if you've got any questions, do feel free to pop them in and we'll be answering those towards the end of the webinar. So as I kind of mentioned at the beginning, we're kind of seeing lots of big news stories at the moment about what's going to happen at the end of COVID. L'Oreal saying it's going to be the roaring 20s, which will follow the post-COVID kind of release. The beauty industry is set for an economic boom. We're going to see a fully digital beauty industry. Masks off as lipstick sales surge up to more than 80%. These are all big news articles that are posted at the beginning of the year. I do think that kind of looking at the dates we're looking at a couple of months ago, maybe it's not as positive now. I think people are realizing that it may not be the biggest boom that we were expecting this year, but it's certainly something we can be optimistic for in the future. But the main thing I kind of brought this up is because we're seeing all these big things about people saying there's going to be a boom, we're going to see all of this, but actually no one said what the consumers are actually thinking themselves. We're just predicting what we expect in terms of the economy. We expect the economy to grow back again anyway, and for people to start purchasing again. But as I mentioned, we actually want to ask the consumers, what do you think? Do you think your habits will change? Do you think they have changed? And that's really what this research was all about, is to back up and give some substance to these articles that we're seeing. So before we go through the research in particular, as I mentioned, I want to talk about social market research, what that is and why you might conduct it. So we're always looking at the behavior of a particular target market. In this case, it will be cosmetic purchasers, because we want to find out people who purchase cosmetics, what their views are. But you could be looking at different groups of people. You could investigate things like ages or genders or countries. And this is all part of that market research that we're really thinking of. We want to do it to gather their opinions, their needs, their attitudes, and their motivations. So it's quite common for people that are launching a new product to conduct some social market research, or for people that have a certain brand strategy and trying to work out if that like kind of communicates to those consumers as well. So it can really help you pinpoint what that target market would benefit from your products or your services. There was nice quotes. I was kind of going through some internet research about market research and social research, but I thought this was really interesting from a blog post. It says, for a business to succeed in the information age, it is necessary to fully understand the target market. Customers are always looking to support businesses that are conveying a message or aiming for a socially conscious goal, and connecting with potential customers on social media platforms is probably the smartest move that any business can make, inspiring communication whilst collecting valuable behavioral data. And I love that, inspiring communication whilst collecting that data, because that's what we're doing. We're always collecting data. That's what it is. But what do we want to use that for? You want to use it to open up a conversation, because the best marketing you'll get and the best advertising you'll get is having a conversation with your consumer where you're listening to their feedback and then delivering it back to them. So I thought that was really great. So when we're talking about sort of social media and putting that out there, I looked at some different kinds of companies, so some different kind of categories that you see use social market research, quite a lot to get their messages across. So one thing is charities. There's this charity from Beauty Banks, the founders, which is The Kids Are Not All Right, which is about hygiene shaming in schools. So they've conducted some market research and they found some really good statistics, well, quite sad statistics actually, but some really valuable statistics for their message, to say that 44% of teachers have witnessed children being bullied because of hygiene shaming, 39% have witnessed children's mental health suffer due to it, and 38% of teachers have had to offer pupils hygiene items. And again, that really helps them raise money for that charity by saying it's a genuine issue. Here is the data to say this is a real issue that is existing, and then be able to get people in to kind of get involved as well. You've also got things like accreditations. So there's the Cosmos Organic, they're the accreditation for organic cosmetics. And they had a really good report which talked about why is that important to the consumer, essentially. So as well as saying, as a brand, we're Cosmos Organic, it was kind of saying, yeah, what do consumers think about that? Again, what do the actual customers think? So half of consumers said the COVID-19 pandemic made them more likely to buy health and well-being, organic beauty and well-being products. And then just over 2 in 5 of those agreed that looking for certification logos helped them to choose the right sustainable beauty and well-being products. So we've really got some great statistics there to say people want organic, and then if they're going to buy organic, they want to see that accreditation. So again, really helpful for their kind of business there. And then you've got things like consumer insights. So this was on the CEW page, and they had some information from an Outspoken Beauty podcast and the consumer research that they've put in there. And it's basically giving their members, because obviously they've got people that are in the cosmetics industry, some really good insights that have been shared on a different platform. So things like 92% of people trust recommendations from friends and family over any type of advertising. And again, it's just really helpful for that overall industry to see this kind of research and then think about how they might change their marketing strategy as well. So without further ado, I'll pass on to Thomas is now going to take us through the research that we did and start thinking about what is happening in the cosmetics industry of COVID. So Thomas, I'm just going to try and give you the handover of the mouse. We'll see if it works.
Thanks, Carys. See if it works.
I've got to give it permission. 2 seconds.
Okay.
This is always going to be difficult. Okay, unlocking it. Right. Let's see if that works. Yay.
Yeah, it seems to work. Thanks, Carys. Okay, just to give you a little bit of roundup at the beginning, some of you might have seen that we have in an earlier webinar already presented the results of our study Life After COVID, which we did last year and repeated this year, where we looked at the potential long-term implications of COVID-19 in general, where we saw some very interesting things in terms of people rediscovering family values and staying at home, etc. So it really gave us some direction that there is an attitude shift happening in the in our countries due to COVID, which is not always for the bad thing. Some people said actually this is all very interesting, but we most of us are in the cosmetics industry, so we should get a bit more deeper in here. And that's what we did over here. We did an additional survey, and apart from the 3 countries that we had before, Germany, US, and the UK, we added India as a different subcontinent and a different attitude to also see what's happening there. It concentrates on the changes COVID-19 has induced and in how far people believe these changes are going to stay. I said we did it in the 4 countries. We had UK, US, Germany, and India. You'll see we did it on a very voluntary base without pushing too hard. And we saw the number of respondents is quite varying, but so we will not look at the overall results, but look at the countries by countries. But in all countries, I think it gives already a glimpse of how people perceive the situation in each of these countries. With a mix of men and women, about 80% women, 20% men, roughly, which also in a way shows probably how cosmetics are being used. We did it in May, so it's already some time ago. As Carys already said in the beginning, given the current COVID situation, things may have changed again. But anyway, the situation is so volatile that any glimpse in time is useful and might change. And we need to continue tracking and observing and seeing what's happening. Just to share with you the questions that we asked. We had a question block on changes in behavior. So many people have changed what they do and how they spend money during the COVID crisis. Can you tell us for the following items and how far this has changed your habits? And for the list of the items that you see on the left-hand side, people could always respond, I do much less than before, I do a bit less, I do the same, I do a bit more, and I do much more than before. So this gives us a feeling of in how far COVID has changed behavior. And we'll go through it in the results in a minute. As a second block, for the same items, we wanted to understand in how far people anticipate these changes to stay. So in how far will this, assuming we get through the crisis, and how far do you think these changes will stay, and how far will you get back to your behavior in 2019? Of course, it's a kind of long shot, but I still think, I do think some people will have a feeling for, yeah, this is something that has changed and is going to stay, or in a way, I'm forced to these kind of changes because of COVID. And I'll go back to my behavior that I was used to before and that I loved before. So same items, different dimension on these items. And as some 2 additional questions, we asked in how people would describe their financial situation. Get a feeling for, is it better or worse? And the expectations regarding your quality of life. This is something we'd also asked in the previous survey. It was a kind of update. How different will your personal quality of life be in the coming years compared to what it was before COVID? So a bit of an outlook and how far people are looking more positive or more negative into the future. So coming to the results. Change of habit. The first question, as we've seen, was a change of habit, take time to care for myself. And typically, this is also a bit of a training session, we also want to share with you some thoughts on how you can visualize and show and showcase data. And typically for questions like this, you start looking at the average. This is also the first summarizing figure that you have in any kind of analysis, also in our reports. And we had this responses, as you see, -2 means less than before, a bit less, -1, the same 0, a bit more 1, much more than before 2. So you would see at an average of 0, it would stay the same. If it's a positive direction, it will be a bit more. If it's a negative average, then it will be less. And you see for this question, you see positive results everywhere. So in all countries, people take more time to care for themselves in COVID time, partly forced because if you stay in your home office or if you can't work properly, then you probably have more time to take care for yourself, but maybe also unforced. But anyway, it's a very clear result. People take more time to care for themselves. And this is especially strong in India, whilst UK, US, and Germany are on a very similar level. It might be that India has this perception, but Carys, I think, will also come back at the very end about cultural bias. And India is a country where people tend to be more extreme and more positive than in some other countries. So there's always a bit of a cultural element in responses per country. But what I wanted to showcase here is that the normal average takes away a lot of information that is hidden beneath, because as you know, an average means an average, and if you shoot left and you shoot right, on average you've hit, and it doesn't, especially it doesn't show the spread of data. So are they all responding in a very similar pattern, or is a broad spread of responses that average out with the numbers over here? So that's why you typically could showcase all the results. So here on the see the same results visualized in stacked bars, where on the left hand side you see the reds. In red, the less before, much less before, a bit less than before. In gray, you see the people who say it will be the same. And on the right-hand side in green, you see light green a bit more than before and dark green much more than before, which shows the same data in more detail. And you also can more clearly see how the people have responded. So here you see that more than half of the Indians take much more time to care for themselves than before. So very, very strong results. And you also see that Germany sees the least amount of change. So Germans tend to be a bit change resistant when they can. So 41% of the Germans said actually they don't see a difference. So there was no change, whilst in India only 11% say they haven't changed. I want to introduce another way of representing data that many of you probably are not so familiar with, but what I like as a visualization of data, especially when it comes to a broad spread of data. For instance, if you look at different incomes, etc., different ages, so they can really broad spread can be nicely summarized in these kind of box plots. Box plots split first of all the data in four equal parts, 4 percentiles. So the 25% with the highest responses, 25% with the medium responses, or the upper high, 25% with the lower medium, and 25% with the lowest responses. And the box shows the middle 50% of these responses. So just by looking at the size of the box, you can get a feeling of how broad is the data being spread around. In the middle, you see the median, as opposed to the average, and the medium is always a better measure of saying how things are really distributed than the mean, because the mean often is very distorted by a few outliers. If you look at the average income per country, in the US, for instance, you have a few billionaires that can definitely distort the picture of a mean value, while if you go for the median, which means this is the amount above which 50% earn less than that, and 50% earn more than that, gives a much more decent view on how the income is really distributed in that country. So this is something that I wanted also now to apply on the on these questions. And I show you the first question, take time to care for myself by country, as a box plot. And in one view, you can see more or less that these first three countries are very similar. UK, US, and Germany, and India is much higher. What's difficult to see is actually the median is the slightly thicker line, which is 1 in the UK, 1 in the US, 1 in Germany, and 2 in India. As we've seen, more than 50% actually have responded to in India. So in this one chart, you can see the median, you can see the average, and you can see the distribution of 50%, the middle 50% of responses. So 50% of responses were between 0 and 1 in all three countries, and they were in India between 1 and 2. So now we go through the results in the shape of box plots. So first I grouped the first three responses, which is about taking care of themselves. So take time to care for myself. This is first question, pamper myself, the second question, and take care of my body as a third question. They are all going the same direction. And you see a very similar pattern. In COVID, in India, COVID has led to a much stronger drive to take care of yourself than the other countries. And all of them, you see the box is much higher than in the other three countries. Germany and UK are fairly similar. US on average, the average again is very similar, but you see that the responses are far more polarizing. The box is wider, which means the US is showing a more polarized response than the other two, let's call them developed countries. If we spending time making myself look beautiful, apart from India, now again the other way of visualizing the data. Apart from India, this evokes quite polarized responses. About as much people spend more time on it as less time in the UK and the US. Germany is a bit more negative. Germany is often a bit more negative in some of these surveys that we see. Can talk about my country. And India is still more positive than all the other countries. But here you see the polarization in these countries, and we will come back to the polarization a little bit later. And you see the polarization in the responses again, that you see the much broader boxes spanning across a much more bigger area. And here I've grouped some other questions together. So it's also about dressing up, use professional treatments, and get my hair done by hairstylists. You see that they're all in the negative area over here. So partly because they couldn't use professional treatments and they couldn't go to a hairdresser, but you clearly see that this is negative. All professional services have gone down in all countries. Spending behavior. The next group of questions was about spending behavior. So we had spend money on beauty products, buy global beauty brands, buy local beauty brands, and buy sustainable products. Again, you see a bit of polarization in many of these questions. Only in India, a clear majority spends more money on beauty products. Here you see in the first question, this is actually polarizing in the other three countries. And interesting to observe is the balance shift on global and local beauty brands. You see that in the UK, you have more local beauty brands on average. And in Germany, you have a more global beauty brands on average. So it's obviously different developments between the UK and Germany. For whatever reason, Germany is becoming more international, UK is more global, more local. Would be interesting to chase why this is the case and if this is really the case, but this is at least an interesting observation in here. For all of us who think we need to do a bit more for the globe, the good news is that sustainability is positively impacted in all countries. So we also had seen this in the first survey, that sustainability is definitely getting higher on people's agenda. And this is also reflected in here. If we talk about different beauty categories, you see is a very positive tendency towards spending money on skincare, the first one, and on hair care, and the second question. When it comes to decorative cosmetics, the picture is much more polarized with a negative average, which is not so much not surprising if you can't go out and if you've got to wear a mask, then the decorative cosmetics are can't play that role that they used to play before. So the second block, as we said, actually are these. So we saw that there are quite a few changes, and the second block was about will these changes stay? So, and then we asked, and how far people believe these changes are going to stay. And as said, we had these kind of 4 response possibilities. Stay as current is the biggest block in here. Go back to what it was in 2019. Go back in the direction of 2019, and it hasn't changed and will not change. So for the first question, take time to care for myself. You see that the vast majority of people say, yeah, we had these changes, and these changes are going to stay. So the reverting to 2019 is only an option for the majority, for the minority of people. The majority will maintain the behavior they have learned and they have adapted during the COVID crisis. So what would this mean overall? I thought about how we can actually showcase and bring the results in a way that people can see at one glance, and how far changes are happening and changes are going to stay. We came up with the following way of highlighting this. So we only, for the block 1, which was the first question, changes more, will you do less or more? We only look at the direction. So is this positive or negative or stable? And we aggregate the responses in block 2. So those who stay as current, and those that hasn't changed, we classify as stable. And those that say we go back in the direction and go back where it was in 2019, we classify as going back. Thus, we can show positive changes here in green, positive staying. Those are the ones that in the first question said they will do more of it. And then the second question block, they say they will not go back to 2019. Positive going back are those who said we'll do more of it, but they will go back to what they had before. And the same actually then for the negative changes. So the highlighted elements, which are the dark ones, are the ones that are likely to show lasting impact. So if we look at the first block here, the 49% for the UK, we had 49% who said, I do take more time to care for myself in COVID, and it will not go back to what it was before. So almost half of the respondents in the UK will continue to take time to care for themselves, which I think is quite a surprising result, at least in that I wouldn't have expected it to that amount. So if we go this, showing the changes and how far they will probably last, many people will continue to take time to care for themselves. So here I will summarize the first 2 questions. And the first, on the left-hand side, you see the first responses, take time to care for myself. So we've seen that in the UK, 40% had say will do a bit more of it, and 19% they will do much more than before. And these 59% split between 49% who will say this is going to stay and 10% who will say it will go back. And the gray one, you see the 21%, this is the same. Those are the ones who said it hasn't changed and it will not change. So overall, again, a very interesting result across the globe or across these countries, that the vast majority of people say, I will take more time to care for myself and it's going to stay. It's almost 2/3 in India, and almost half of it in UK and US. We've got a similar results when it comes to pampering yourself. Again, 41% and 40% in the US and 29% in Germany and 54% in India, who will continue to pamper themselves more than they did before COVID. Up. The same. And we've seen that all these questions go in a similar direction. Take care of my body. Again, same results. Very high percentage of people who have changed their behavior, and it will continue to be the same. Interesting. You see, if you look at the lower level, those who did less of it, for them, the majority will go back. So we had 23% in the UK, for instance, who said, I take less care of my body during COVID. And of these 23%, 19% say it will return back. So when it was negative, probably forced negative, they will revert to their changer. When it was positive, they will rather keep it. And the drive to make yourself look beautiful continues. So spending time to making myself look beautiful is also something that we had seen. It was polarizing in the beginning. So there was about as much people who said they will do less of it than they will do more of it. But for those who do more of it, they will keep it. Those who did less of it, the majority will come back to pre-COVID behavior. The vast majority of those who dress up less during COVID will revert their behavior, while most of who dress up more will keep it. So here, a very similar picture. We saw that the vast majority of people said they would dress up less than before, because obviously the opportunity isn't there. But of those, almost everybody will revert back to what we had before. The use of professional treatments has suffered heavily and is probably not fully coming back. So this is actually was interesting to see the use of professional treatment spa salons. We've seen that, for instance, in the UK and the US, 65% use it less in the crisis. But of those 65%, only 37%, so a bit more than half of them, say it will go back to what it was before COVID. There's still a high proportion of people who say, I will continue to use it less, which I think is not a very positive signal for the ones who own this kind of spa or whatever kind of beauty salons. And the similar picture for visits to hairstylists. You see a big proportion of people who did less of it, quite a number of coming back, but still a high percentage of people who say it will stay low. It's a very positive outlook for spendings on beauty products. So I think this is a very positive signal for all those who work in the beauty industry. We've seen that this was a polarizing response from the start, but there was a high proportion of people who do less, who do more currently, and out of those, the vast majority will stay in the area of using more than before. Whilst if you look at those who use less, the majority will come back. So in general, I think a very positive outlook. Global beauty products should benefit from this, with the exception of the UK. So we saw originally that the UK is a little bit different in here. And this is also shown over here, while we have the reverse picture in local beauty products will also benefit apart from Germany. So we had Germany, the stronger impact on global beauty brands, in the UK, the stronger positive impact on local beauty products. And the positive development of sustainable products is assumed to stay. We saw already in the first question that there's a huge proportion of people, or very high proportion of people, who say they will use more, that they do use more sustainable products. And the vast majority of those who use more will continue to use them, or at least claim they will use more of it. So again, a positive outlook for sustainable products. If we talk at the product categories, skincare, very positive. So people already using a lot more skincare than before COVID. And the biggest part of them will stay in that area and will continue to use products with skincare. And the same for hair care. And finally, decorative cosmetics, however, suffer and will struggle to come back. So we saw a very polarized response in that. Quite a high proportion of people who use less of it. But what surprised me a little bit is that not a majority of those who use less of it will come back. We saw a different picture when we looked, for instance, at hairdressers, where the majority of those who using less hairdressers than before COVID will come back to their old behavior, whilst here the majority stays in the negative. So not a very bright outlook for decorative cosmetics. Even though this is quite polarizing, you also see that there's a high proportion who will use more and will use more. So overall, probably we might end up to where we were before, but not with the same anticipated growth as we'd seen for other parts of the beauty industry. Financial situation. We see that in Germany and India, the majority says the financial situation is worse than it was before. So you see the red and the yellow bars. It's more than half. In US, it's close to 50% with 47%. UK is pretty positive in that respect. Only 29% feel the situation is worse, balanced by 25% who claim it's even better than before. So don't know actually if the British people are extremely positive or if the economy is thriving or whatever it is, especially now with Brexit. This is really surprising, but at least this is what they tell us over here. And finally, the outlook on the quality of life. As the last one, you see here, we had the same style of question. We had much worse, worse, the same, better, and much better. And this is in a way also a very positive signal. It's only a minority who think the quality of life will be worse in the long term. Only in Germany, the feedback is mixed. There are about as much people expecting it to be worse as there are people expecting it to be better. In the 3 other countries, the vast majority of people expect a better quality of life after COVID than they had before. So what we've seen, I think there's a shift in values happening away from purely financial ones, which also make people have a positive outlook on some of these in a future years whenever they will fully manifest. To summarize, COVID has induced strong behavioral changes. In most cases, these are expected to stay. And when it comes to caring for yourself, there's definitely a positive development. People seem to rediscover the value of taking care of themselves and their bodies. External services were attended a lot less, and they might not come back to what it was before COVID. And financially, the majority seems not to expect long-lasting damages, and the overall outlook on the future quality of life is very positive, with a small exception of Germany.
Amazing. Thanks, Thomas.
So it was a lot of data, a lot of information. I'm not sure you could digest it all, but as you know, you can also get to look at it afterwards.
I think it's a great summary though, and I think it is really encouraging because certainly, as you know as well, we're product testers. It's really reflecting what I think we've seen a lot of in terms of the types of products we're testing. So where we used to do a lot more makeup and things like that, it is much more about skincare and supplements. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really reflecting that that's what the consumers want as well. And I think that the whole industry is having this shift where so instead of covering up anything, the idea is to be more healthy, look after yourself more and pamper yourself. And in doing that, you will have a more beautiful outlook anyway. So that's really encouraging as well. And certainly on that note, the professional kind of treatments people are doing at home, we're getting a lot of tests for things like devices, stuff that people are supposed to use at home instead of going to a salon. And that's certainly looking like that's what people want as well, which is great. I think what's really important to note is it's such an overview, and that's always how market research starts. So we kind of say things about the financial situation. Well, why does the UK seem really good? Because it shouldn't be, probably. But then, I mean, we mentioned it's like, well, maybe it's because people haven't been going out as much. They haven't been going on holiday. No one's been able to leave the country. So they have a better financial situation because they're just not spending as much money. So I think it's really interesting to look at like scratching the surface really. And if people wanted to go into further depth, this is what it's all about, is then going, okay, maybe we want to find out more about that and kind of looking into it more. So I think it's just a nice thing for you guys watching. If there's ever anything like that and you're like, oh, that was really interesting, I now want to go do a study and find out more about that. That's certainly how market research works. You start off with a big wide net and then you can delve deeper into it. But definitely. Certainly, as we were mentioning, oh God, take my control back on my, can I do that? There we go. Take the control back on the keyboard. But as you mentioned, there are different biases that we have to put in mind as well. So I really wanted to touch on those and talk about when you have a market research study like that, there is certain ways that you need to be able to understand the bias that could exist, and that could change that data. So a couple of different types of bias, I won't go into all of them too much, but a couple of different ones that were relevant are things like social desirability bias. So there's 3 different types. So impression management. So what is your impression you're giving out there? People want to look good. Could be a reason that the financial situation looks better in the UK because people don't want to admit they haven't got any money. But you never know. Again, it's kind of looking at that and having that in your mind. It's not really 100% always. You have to think about these things. Also ego defense and self-deception. So believing you're a better person than you are. Things like sustainable products. People might say they buy more sustainable products than they actually do because they want to seem like they're doing more for the environment. So it's something that could be in that case as well. And instrumentation, so deliberately lying in the hope of bringing about some change. So probably not so much of this research, but we've seen it once before. You know, it could be something like, do you think that men and women should be paid equally? And they could say, you know, that they don't get paid equally, so they can try and get that statistic to kind of make it more shocking that maybe women aren't paid as much. That's obviously a really random example, but it gives you an idea of what can exist there, kind of making a situation look worse or better than it is so that you can bring about some kind of change. So the good thing is with this research, there are some things that are really polarizing, but as I mentioned, things like about sustainable products, it's such an overwhelming majority that you can kind of go, okay, no, it does look like that is the case. But when you get those polarizing questions, it might be that you think about, is there kind of bias that could be affected there? So maybe it should be more negative or more positive, but people have maybe talked about things to be more socially desirable, essentially. So it's always really important to think about this kind of thing when you're reviewing data. There are ways to deal with it. And so luckily, a lot of them are things that we do anyway. So online questionnaires are always good because you're not asking someone to their face, how often do you recycle or something like that, and making them lie about it. They're less likely to lie if they're just answering an online questionnaire, which is what we've done. You can extend answer scales. So for example, it could be, again, in that case, if I've got that example in my head now, if you're saying how often do you recycle, instead of saying, you know, every day and stuff, and then kind of making it quite short, so every day and then every week, you might kind of do it to very wide, like once a year, and then kind of, yeah, more like every single day I do all my recycling, and make it a really wide scale so people are more likely to sit in the middle. Whereas if it looks like the worst option is the highest option and that's what they do, they'll not want to select it. You want to reassure the confidentiality. So again, all of our research has to be very clear that it's confidential because of GDPR regulations. So that really helps. But yeah, making sure people know that their data is anonymized and that they don't really know who they are or anything like that does really help. And just generally appealing to their honesty. So you can look at phrasing questions in certain ways, not necessarily for this type of research, but again, if you do want to find out something, generally it might be kind of looking more like that political kind of value as well, and going, you know, honestly, how did you vote this year or something like that? Did you vote for Brexit? You will not be judged, that kind of thing, and really appealing to their honesty. So that kind of research that we've conducted, we have to think about that kind of thing. So cultural response bias is the other one that I wanted to mention, because as we said about India, that's quite a clear one when it comes to cultural response. So there are some really broad rules of thumb. This is all from the Market Research Society, by the way. So they've obviously done their research on this, and I've taken it from them. So Latin countries, so places like Southern Europe and Latin America, will tend to be more positive than average. India tends to be extremely positive. There are highly collective societies such as Japan and South Korea that tend to use extreme points. So they'll either say that they love it if they like it, or they'll say they hate it if they don't like it. So you kind of think about that as well. And Nordic countries, and we can kind of group Germany with that.
In that respect, yes.
They tend to be a little bit less positive. But no, certainly it's one of those, you can kind of use it again, and you take everything with a pinch of salt. But for example, we do product testing in India because people have a kind of customer base there. They want to sell their products there. We would say if your product does badly in India, it really is, you know, bad. So you really need to think about reformulation rather than taking it with a pinch of salt. Whereas if your product if your product does very well in Germany, it really is very good because people will be less positive. So we always think about these things as well. there are ways that we can look at kind of dealing with it as well. So another the important things to do is to look at current news products or services. So again, not so helpful for this type of research, but when it comes to, say, testing in certain countries, we'll look at other studies we've conducted there. So if say a serum looks like it hasn't done very well, we can say, well, how did other serums rate there? And is it on that kind of level? You can benchmark against brands you aspire to be. So again, we're really looking more product testing in that sense, but it's a really helpful thing to know. So if you know the certain claims that have been substantiated in certain countries and the percentage of people that have said they like it, you can really think about what that is. You can also test against those brands as well, just to see, okay, is your product liked as much as them? And you can always let people know you won't be offended by their honest opinion. So certainly in India, please don't feel like you have to rate it positively. We won't be offended. Did you like it? And that's really important as well. So, I mean, I think even though there is a cultural response with India being highly rated, the kinds of question it is, it's not about being like, did you like this? Did you like this? We're asking about their habits. So there is that side of it that, yes, they're probably slightly more extreme than the other countries. But when you're asking someone about their own habits, there's not as much need to sort of be really positive, because we're just asking how they behave. So yes, there's sort of interesting sort of feedback there at the end, just to give you an idea about, yeah, how we need to think about data as well as just reading it. It's never just as, it's not, it's always a gray area. It's not black and white. That data is that data. You have to think about how you're reading it. So now I can open up to some questions. I have seen one come in, so let's see what we've got. So someone had to leave. Sorry, not a question. But yes, as I said, well, we will be sending out the recording as well, and I can also send out the slides if people would like them. So yeah, we'll share that out after now. So yeah, that will be there. But does anyone else have any other questions? Please feel free to put them in the Q&A box. When I do send out that recording, I will include our contact information as well. So if you do have any questions that come later on down the line, please do let us know. So basically, are consumers looking for accreditations such as B Corp has come in? Well, again, this is kind of us scratching the surface. So we don't have any further information about that in particular. But again, it's something that you might want to look into. So if you are looking at the kind of different, say, for example, if you're developing a product and you do want to know, should we be putting accreditations on our products? Get in touch with us. This is the sort of thing we can help with. We get a lot of product tests, concept tests. So before people have even launched a product, saying, okay, if we go down this route, if we do this with our branding, if we put this on our packet, what do our consumers want? As I mentioned, that's what social market research is, looking at your target consumer and saying, what do they want to see on those products, on this concept?
And especially if you have something like this logo, you can easily also do it in a concept-wise with pictures, not just picture without a picture with the logo, and see how it elicits different responses and different interests in the product.
Exactly. You haven't got to kind of be so open and say, do you want to see that accreditation? You can say, look at these two pictures of the product, which one looks more trustworthy? And it might be the one with the accreditation does. So yeah, there's certainly certain things that we can do there. So if you are interested in something like concept testing, do feel free to reach out. So I can't see any other questions coming in. I don't want to hold everyone up, but as I mentioned, please do feel free to get in touch if anything comes into your mind later on. Just to wrap up, the SCS Training and Events coming up. Please do look at the SCS diploma course in the essentials of cosmetic science if that is something you're interested in. You can look at their website, and it's distance learning, so you can do it anywhere at any time. There's also the IFSCC Congress, which is going to be in September 2022. So only about a year away now. I can't believe I've been saying this for about a year already. And we're very proud to be sponsoring that event and exhibiting there, so you can come and see us as well. So please register your interest there whenever you get a chance. Upcoming webinars as well. Next week, I'll be looking at compliance and effective social media marketing. So what are these big problems that we've been seeing recently? People getting tripped up in the social media. So looking at how we can get our results out there without getting into trouble. I will be joined by Buzz Beauty again on the 20th of August for launching a brand internationally, part 2. And I've got claim validation and the real consumer voice on the 27th of August. So again, looking at a bit of research that we've done, what do consumers want to see when they're looking at validating claims as well. So there is our contact information, but I will be sharing it on email. Thank you so much for joining and presenting all those results, Thomas. It was great.
Thank you, Carys.
And thank you everyone who
thank you all. Yeah.
Thank you everyone who's joined us today. Have a fantastic weekend and hopefully see you next week.